myself because he did a great job. I typically start my talks by making people do Mexican waves and stuff, but today I have a different surprise for you, and I also have very little time and a lot to tell you, and also this person who's going to join us later also has a lot to share with us. Yeah, this is the Angular road to SSR, or server-side rendering and hydration. Let me show you or talk to you about those building blocks you see here behind me. You see microparts, you see server-side rendering, hydration, and global and regional. For me, a great full-stack solution has to have at least these 3 blocks. What do I mean by microparts? I don't want to be prescriptive and say that's a micro frontend, or that's a microservice, or that's a, I don't know, a static application that is connecting to a serverless API. But it's something that is micro in the sense of not a huge monolith, and that can be composable, and that works together very well. And when we have that context, we probably, for performance reasons, want to think about enhancements like server-side rendering, like that we have to, obviously, if we're going to have static pages, we have to rehydrate to make them dynamic. And in that same context, we want to think about global, or at least, at a minimum, regional distribution of data sources, and sometimes this context of execution as well, to make them more distributed as well and closer to the end users for, again, performance reasons. And why do we want to think about server-side as part of these winning building blocks? Because server-side rendering helps us with delivering enhanced performance, with improving the user experience. And remember, we are always building for the end users. That's what we are trying to do. So, of course, we want to have the best developer experience, but we have to make sure that we are focused on creating solutions for our end users, right? And, of course, we want our applications content to be discoverable, to be indexed, and in the new context of AI even, we want it to be, again, searchable. We want to have everything rendered and discover again. So how we do that? Well, by pre-rendering HTML and content. I don't have a clicker, so I have to come back every time. But let's roll back to the rendering possibilities we have had with Angular over time, right? It's not always been the case that we could render server-side. We started with the defaults for SPA, right? Client-side rendering. So we would send all the assets from the server and then let the client deal with everything. Like, let's process, let's parse the JavaScript and execute it and fetch the data and make sure that everything falls into place and we have a page to show. That, of course, became over time evident was not very performant. And when in 2020, Google released the Core Web Vitals, we already had a lot of metrics client-side to understand what the performance health of our application was. But with Core Web Vitals, it was even more evident. We had to start thinking about different strategies to rendering our content and our applications. I'm not going to dive deep into Core Web Vitals because Michael already did a talk about that. And yeah, there's a lot of content that you can search online. If you do not know what Core Web Vitals are, I invite you to do a little research. But then when we started exploring how can we become more effective at rendering applications, of course, we came up with third-party and first-party tools to server-side render or statically generate sites. And we came across this problem, this new problem. If we send a pre-render and then we bootstrap the application, the pre-render is destroyed, and then everything, the state is rebooted, so to say. Imagine if you have a video player, for example, in the page. It's pre-rendered, you send it from the server to the client, and then you bootstrap JavaScript, and if the player was at, I don't know, 20 seconds, well, let's hope it's more optimal than that, 3, 4, 5 seconds, and yeah, everything reboots and it goes back to 0. That's not a great experience for our users, right? So we want to prevent those flickers, the duplicated state, the duplicated data. How do we do that? Well, we see starting in Angular 16, a lot of work being done in order to prevent that, to make it more optimal, to find different ways to bootstrap Angular without destroying everything that was there, without destroying the DOM tree. And this is when we finally got to this place. Non-destructive hydration, so we send the pre-render, Angular gets bootstrapped, and the DOM is preserved, and then we can attach to it, to this existing tree, the event handlers and the state, and that, of course, is a fantastic optimization, but it's not enough. We need to continue to work. We see in version 17, there is even more work done, and all the way to version 18 by enabling support for SSR for localized applications. So we see over time a great deal of work and thinking and optimizations being applied. But again, like you probably understood from the previous talk, there is a lot more work to make this kind of rendering effective than just enabling a different type of hydration. And we are on the right path, but probably we need to still do more. However, I am going to show you that even the CLI today, how many of you have already been working with SSR? Not even, I don't mean in production, but at least, okay, very few hands. So I'm going to show you quickly, if I find my terminal, how we generate an application. It's super simple. I'm going to go with something I already had. Let's call it, give me a name, come on. NGROM app, and -- SSR, and that's, oh, yeah, no, that's okay. And that's all we need. Of course, it's in interactive and going to ask for more. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to do it a little bit more effective over here, so we can already start the application while I continue to, sorry, NGROM app. Okay, there you go. Could not find the, oh, why? This is something that wasn't happening before, and then the demo gods said, we don't want you to work with this. So what I'm gonna say is I'm going to play with the one that we already had. Oh, npm install, okay. It wasn't the demo gods, it was me. Okay, there you go. So we're going to dive in the code right now. It's very simple because what we get is a server file. We're going to see it in a moment. And then some pre-configuration to make sure that out of the box with the CLI, as we are used to, because we are very used to the CLI being this great, we already have a server-side application, well, an application with server-side rendering capabilities. Let's see, while it works, let's go back to the application. This, what we get, however, is obviously a very basic scenario. We could think about more complex scenarios. One of the most common ones is a user profile, because you may be asking, yeah, Natalia, okay, you are trying to sell the idea of server-side rendering. We understand that performance is optimized with these techniques, but give me a use case. Where do I apply this? Yeah, the user profile is a typical example, because if you have one, you have a set of common elements and common sections probably that are going to be present in every user profile. And then you want to probably fetch some data, so this is why you are going to send some authentication token or some kind of identification of the user, so the server understands where to fetch the data from or what data to fetch, and be able to generate or render pages with content that is relevant to a specific user, cache it, and send it back in the response. For these kind of scenarios, we probably want to think more about partial hydration, because if you have some parts that are common to every user profile, why re-rendering everything or pre-rendering everything? We probably want to just compose, and that composability can be done also. Usually is designed to be done at the edge of the network, closer to the user, but there are other ways to also do exactly the same in origin. But for that, again, and this is my focus, we need infrastructure and a supporting infrastructure. And I'm going to show you that even today, with this kind of application, let's go, it's still serving, it's still building. A little bit slow, probably, because I have the mysterious color. So, okay, we have the application here. We see that we have a browser bundle and the server bundle. It's working. What I'm interested in is actually not this, but this. So you can see it generated a server, and we have it configured so Common Engine will pre-render and save the files in the distribution folder or wherever you pre-configure. And we're also bootstrapping the main server, and if we go here to the application configuration, we're going to see that we are providing also client hydration in order to do the hydration magic. That's great, but if we go to, for example, this other app I have here, let me see, where do I have it? If I find it, of course. Is it possible that I close the browser? No, it's here. So I have this, I love JavaScript application that I snatched from somebody called Igor Minar, and he has deployed it to Cloudflare, but I have deployed the same application over here to container apps in Azure, and they look the same, and you may think it's exactly the same code, but if we go to inspect his code, because he is deploying to workers, he has to do some configuration, and when you go to my deployment over here, I have a different type of configuration myself, because I'm running in a container. And these are kind of the discrepancies and the lack of consolidation, the lack of an opinion that will help us deliver more efficient applications. We also don't have a consistent data story or data fetching in the server. And so in the end, I think that this story for server-side rendering in Angular needs to evolve, and it needs better tooling, it needs better developer experience and documentation, and it needs to really connect to this idea of partial hydration so we can design applications with better intent from the get-go and have potentially an architecture based on islands. And we have also a cross-platform deployment and configuration story that can be kind of a cohesive consolidator across the many infrastructure providers. I am also very excited about the Nitro integration, but I don't have a lot of insights on that. However, this friend I am going to put on screen right now does. So let's see. Let me see if we can get him on the call. Well, he's here, but I don't see the slides. Igor Minar. Introduce yourself, please.
Hey, Jerome, how are you doing? I'm all the way in California. You have to be much louder for me to hear you. So let's try one more time. How are you doing? Yes. Awesome. Thanks. So hi, I'm Igor. I'm one of the people that created Angular, and I used to lead the team. I'm no longer on the team, but I'm very much in the community and working on SSR and other things. And we were discussing this topic with Natalia, and she asked me an interesting question, actually. She asked me, what would you do, what would your plan be if you were leading Angular in 2024? What would SSR story be like? And just to make it clear, I'm no longer on the Angular team, and I cannot speak for the Angular team or Google. So this is my personal opinion. You can like it or not like it, and Angular team can do whatever they want. I'm happy to help, but just to be clear, this is my personal opinion, not the Angular plan. So what would I do? Let's start with the mindset. Because whenever you're starting to make a plan, you have to understand, like, what are the assumptions, what is the state of the world. So let's just get on the same page about the mindset. And some of the assumptions and my mindset is that full stack with server-side rendering is a non-optional part in modern web applications. Now and in the future, any application that is not using SSR will be falling behind and will not provide good developer experience, good user experience, and that is going to drag the application down. Another assumption, another part of the mindset is that Angular, the open source renaissance that we're seeing, and we've seen over the last 2 years, will run out of fuel if Angular doesn't have a full stack story. And I'm pretty sure about this. No matter what the Angular team does, and they're doing amazing work, if Angular doesn't have a full stack story in the near future, this renaissance will run out of fuel. And I also know that a full stack story is much more than just SSR. So Angular team, if you look at the Angular roadmap, there's a lot of SSR improvements, hydration, partial hydration, many things. But full stack much more than that. And Natalia already talked to you about that previously. It's like data loading, all the deployment configuration, many other things that need to be solved to make the full stack story. Okay, so I also know that Google can't and won't run JavaScript-based servers. The production infrastructure at Google is just not set up for that. It's not something that is possible unless there's like huge company-wide buy-in, which is too big of an undertaking. I just don't see that realistically happening anytime soon. So that tells me that Google won't adopt any JavaScript-based full stack. That's a big bummer. So my conclusion from all of this is that full stack story support is the most important missing Angular feature. And it's a feature that the Angular team at Google should not build. And they should not build it because Google's not going to use it. But it should be built. So what's the plan? It's a little bit complicated, but that's the reality, so let's go. My proposal, if I was on the team, would be two-part solution, two-part plan. This is the plan that I will be pitching the team on. This is the plan I will be pitching the Google management on. And these are the two parts. The first part is keep on improving the server-side rendering story in Angular. It's already on the trajectory, so just keep on fueling that. Continue the effort on partial hydration, that is awesome. Deferred blocks, a huge enabler of partial hydration, isolation, many other things. Continue doing performance optimizations, both in the runtime, in how SSR works, because that is crucial, and do very basic Nitro integration. I was a little concerned when I saw that team announced that Nitro is being evaluated. After I thought about this a little more and talked to a few people, I think it actually makes sense. But the integration should be very minimal, just to prove that the SSR story that the Angular core team is building, or that is built into Angular core, is working well with something like Nitro, but I don't think that Nitro should be Nitro integration built by the Angular team should be the full stack story for Angular. And this is where the second part of the plan comes. I think Angular should actually adopt analog as the official full stack story for Angular. You might have heard of analog. There's this fellow, Brandon, that just gave a presentation on Angular, on analog. So I'm not going to go too much into the depth. But the thing I want to highlight is that Brandon and analog are already on a good trajectory to provide really good story for full stack in Angular, and they just need a little more support. I have a lot of respect for Brandon. He has proven his leadership and technical skills on other projects like JRX, Angular Router in the past, and now Analog. So I trust him a lot. I think he's the right person to lead this effort, but he needs to be able to do so. And when I say Angular should adopt analog, I really mean adopt and support, but do not destroy. Because if you embrace analog too much and roll it into Google and into the way Angular team at Google has to work to make Angular work both internally and externally, I think that would actually cause analog to languish and slow down. And that's not something we want. So instead, what I would propose is that secure funding for Brandon and one more person so that they can work on analog full time. I would propose that the team treat them as part of the team so that they really have all of the support, all of the resources necessary, all the connections, but they're given a lot of autonomy so that they can execute on their own. There should be coordination between reps so that analog is doing things that make sense for Angular, and Angular framework and core are doing things that are necessary for analog. And I also think that analog should be included in docs, DevRel, release cycle, LTS support, and all of that, so that it really feels like an official part of Angular. And it's not something that is just on the side, built by the community. Because the perception I would aim for is that big enterprises who are the main adopters of analog, or who would be the main adopters of analog, should feel safe about using analog. There should be no doubt about, will the Angular team support analog, what's going to happen with analog in the future. That to disappear, and the way to do that is to really prove that analog support is sustainable and is supported by the Angular team. So if we do this, these two parts, I think things will look really, really good, but it's not going to be enough. But these things are prerequisites. So there is a little more to do once these basic things are sorted out. And there are three things that are on my mind. The first one is single file compilation. This is something that has been talked about in the community for some time. Angular team is interested in implementing this. It's a big undertaking, but it's a big enabler for many things, including a more efficient SSR and better full stack story. So I think that is one of the prerequisites for like the future evolution of the full stack story. I also think that Angular needs to embrace string-based SSR. I don't want to go too much into it, but basically all of the like React and Angular today is a generation of frameworks that use DOM emulation on the server side to produce the SSR output. This works, but it's very resource intensive. You need much more memory, much more CPU cycles to actually produce the SSR output. And to do this efficiently at scale, you really need to switch over to something linear. And if you look at Solid or Quick, that's the next generation of frameworks that are out there these days, they use something called string-based SSR. And I think this is the right thing for Angular in the future. But that assumes that analog is already in, and SSR is being rolled out. And the last thing that I want to point out is that there is this crazy guy, Mishka, who's running around the world and talking to people about resumability and how resumability is the future and should replace hydration. I actually think he's right. And I think even though it's not realistic right now where Angular is now, I think one of the future-looking targets should be how can we adopt resumability and make it possible in Angular. This is huge, very complex project. I don't know if it's even possible, but I think it should be something that the team should aspire to do. So with that, let's keep pushing the web forward. And thank you for having me. Natalia?
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Igor, for joining us. And if you want to learn more, there are QR codes to our websites where we discuss server-side rendering, micro frontends, and a myriad of other things, standards. We love the web. We want it to move forward and prevail. So thank you so much, and see you soon.